While the Army of the Potomac was stuck in fierce fighting at Spotsylvania Courthouse, and the Army of the James was butting heads with Beauregard, Major General Phillip Sheridan would take his cavalry on an expedition around the Army of Northern Virginia to seek out his opponent. The cavalry of the Army of Northern Virginia, under the command of James Ewell Brown Stuart. Stuart was willing to give him a fight. Upon noticing the departure of the Federal cavalry from Spotsylvania, Stuart gathered Fitzhugh-Lee's division of cavalry and pursued his foe. Early on May 11th, 1864, they would come to rest their horses in Henrico County, along the Telegraph Road, nearby the abandoned inn colloquially known as Yellow Tavern. The position, as Stuart had intended, would place their forces directly at the front of Sheridan's cavalry. This was exactly what Sheridan had wanted. The leading elements of Sheridan's force, under the command of Brigadier General Wesley Merritt, assaulted Brigadier General Lunsford Lomax's brigade at the intersection of Mountain Road and Telegraph Road, forcing him to withdraw up the Telegraph Road. They would form a defensive line along a ridge overlooking a creek known as Turner Run, with the Lomax taking the left flank on the east side of the Telegraph Road, while Wickham would take up the right. One of Morett's subordinates, the young, charismatic Brigadier General George Armstrong Custer, would conduct some reconnaissance of the position after the Confederate artillery went silent. He noticed that the position could be carried if a sufficient force was directed at the position. Two of Custer's Michigan cavalry, the 1st and 7th, would lead the assault in the center, directly up the Telegraph Road, with the support of the 1st Vermont of Colonel George Chapman's brigade. Meanwhile, the 5th and 6th Michigan would assault the Confederate left, while the rest of Chapman's brigade would assault the Confederate right. Sheridan, who had arrived on the field of battle, approved of the plan. Stuart was on the ridge with his men, directing the defense when Custer, who was leading his men into battle, began his assault. Custer would later write, "As soon as the 1st Michigan moved from the cover of the woods, the enemy divined our intention and opened a brisk fire from his artillery with shell and canister." The assault by the 1st Michigan Cavalry would punch a hole through the Confederate center, but Stuart, directing his reinforcing units from Wickham's brigade, was able to drive them back, allegedly engaging in the action by shooting the retreating Michiganders. However, during the melee, fate would play its hand. A dismounted cavalryman of the 1st Michigan, while retreating, had passed by Stuart. He turned around and fired a single shot, which went through his stomach and out of his back. Suffering in excruciating pain, he was forced to go back, relinquishing command to Fitzhugh-Lee before being placed in an ambulance bound for Richmond. Even so, he still urged his men to continue to fight on, rather wanting to die than see defeat. Custer, meanwhile, would send the 7th Michigan and 1st Vermont Cavalry forward, which finally broke the Confederate line and forced a retreat. Sheridan had won his battle against Stuart. All the while, Stuart, still languishing in pain, was brought to Richmond, specifically to 206 West Grace Street. There, accompanied by others, they sang his favorite hymn, Rock of Ages, as he finally passed away at 7:38 p.m. on May 12, 1864. He would be laid to rest at Hollywood Cemetery, where he lies to this day. Stuart's death rocked the South, though the war would continue on. Sheridan, who seemingly had an open road to Richmond, would encounter more units of Confederate cavalry and Confederate infantry. He would bypass Richmond, swinging towards the east, then south towards Bermuda Hundred, the base of operations for the Army of the James. Though the field of battle has been upended by development, the memory of the battle carries on as the grand victory of one of the Union's greatest generals, and a tragedy of one of the South's greatest heroes.